by Goodwin's Landscape Company here in Germantown. It is maintained by CNC Landscape. Is anyone here from those two organizations, those businesses? Each month, a designated Beautification Commission member is responsible for identifying potential award winners and making a recommendation to the Commission. The September Commission designee is Clifton Gurley, who is also the chair. And Ms. Ruth Crawford, if you will present the award to Mr. Jason Speed with Speed Investments, LLC. Thank you so much, Jason. Well,
all right, Jason. Happy birthday.
On the count of three, could we all say happy birthday, Jason? 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday, Jason.
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize Jason's father, Charlie, as well, who's here this evening as well and has a lot to do with this. And the entire family, I take it. We congratulate you. It's a beautiful property, and it looks gorgeous, and we wish you all the best. Thank you. Brings us to item 6B on the agenda this evening, Special Recognition Citizens Life-Saving Award, Chief Selberg and Athletic Club Director Phil Rogers.
Thank you, Board and Mayor. I'd also like Amy LaRusso, Monica Stout, and Naira Crawford to join us up here, please, too. On Friday morning, August 17th, a guest of the Germantown Athletic Club was leaving the facility when he collapsed outside the front door. Assistant Club Director Amy LaRusso and Group Fitness Instructor Monica Stout happened to be just outside the front door as well and immediately came to his assistance. Amy directed Naira Crawford to call 911 as his breathing was labored and his eyes had rolled back in his head. The guest began convulsing and staff could not detect a pulse. A bystander was attempting to initiate chest compressions and was relieved by Monica until EMS arrived on the scene. During that time, Naira stayed on the phone with 911 and answered dispatchers' questions while EMS was en route. An AED was retrieved and hooked up to the patient, but no shock was required as of yet.
Upon arrival of the fire department, firefighter, paramedics, and EMTs assumed patient care. CPR was continued, along with cardiac defibrillation. Normal sinus cardiac rhythm and breathing were restored prior to transport to the hospital. The patient was discharged from the hospital in good condition the following Monday. The quick actions and knowledge of what to do by the athletic club staff ensured immediate continuance of the patient's heartbeat and circulation, greatly increasing the odds that his heart could be converted back to normal rhythm. This ultimately allowed his life to be saved so he could return to his family. Cardiac arrests usually result in the death of the patient, although we're working hard in Germantown to improve those odds. A quick, effective response by the athletic club staff, along with aggressive cardiac arrest procedures by the firefighters, gave this person another chance at life. This was a true team effort. Effective CPR provided prior to the arrival of emergency medical services is often the difference between life and death for the patient. Fortunately, in Germantown, we have a lot of people that make the effort to learn quality CPR and AED use and are willing to step in to save their fellow citizen's life. This is one of the reasons we have such a great cardiac arrest survival rate in Germantown.
And a health and fitness facility is heavily trafficked, and with as many members as ours, it's not a matter of if a cardiac arrest or another emergency will happen. It's a question of when. We take great pride in making sure all our frontline staff are CPR and certified, and even greater pride when it can be put to use to help save a life. Chief Selber and I are honored to present the Citizens Life-Saving Award to Amy LaRusso, Monica Stout, and Naira Crawford.
The board joins in our thanks as well. It's not every day, but when it does occur, We're very thankful for our staff to be trained and be able to save a life. To me, that deserves another round of applause. Brings us to item number 7 on the agenda this evening, Alderman liaison reports. We move from Alderman position 1 through 5. Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you, Mayor. On last Thursday, the 16th, the Senior Commission met, and we discussed a couple of items, particularly the neighborhood night out, in which we're going to be participating in. We're working together with the police department and reaching out to the public to talk with them about a streetlight watch program, which actually will be, if you see any streetlights that are out, you report them to the city, and they in turn will report them to MLG&W. Also, we're going to institute a neighborhood watch program, which I think is very necessary. The summit, or Senior Expo, I should say, is November the 1st at GPAC. And we're looking forward to all of the seniors coming out to the expo. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Neighborhood Preservation Commission would like to invite everyone to come out to the Neighborhood Summit, October 23rd at the Great Hall and Conference Center. The theme of this year's summit is Will You Be My Neighbor? It is to foster community and neighborhood leadership. The Neighborhood of the Year, Neighborhood Leader of the Year, Neighbor of the Year, and several others will be announced that night, and it is a wonderful way to connect on a deeper level with our neighbors. That's my report, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, I don't have any reports from my commissions, but I would like to thank Bo Mills and the rest of our environmental commission members for helping work the Amnesty Dumpster Day. So, Bo, thank you. Thank you to all our commission members. And there was a question that was raised about the smell that was emanating from Poplar Estates Park, and I just want to address that briefly. That is just an area where we put mulch, basically, to trap the gas that comes out of the sewer line. It doesn't, as I'm told by Bo Mills, there's no danger there. My son and wife and I play there on the park equipment fairly regularly, and just occasionally there is a little bit stronger smell coming from the pipe than usual, but it's just a mulch bed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Owens.
Thanks, Mayor. The DRC, or Design Review Commission, meets tomorrow night, and the Planning Commission meets a week from tomorrow night, and so I have no report tonight.
Thank you. Alderman Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. The Retirement and Post-Benefit Commission met, and everything is good for our staff for the future. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just quickly from my office, just like to thank several personnel with the fire department that were recently deployed to Tennessee. Task Force 1 was deployed to the Carolinas, and several of our members are part of that group. Firefighter Brett Bumfind, Chief as well, Assistant Fire Marshal Clint Starnes, Lieutenant Eric Grizar, Lieutenant Mike Pohl, Lieutenant Ed Cardosi, Lieutenant Stephen Shue, and driver Joshua Waterbury were all deployed and returned safely. So we appreciate your work on behalf of other citizens of this country and the experience you gained doing that as well. That concludes Alderman Liaison reports, and we move to item 8 on the agenda, citizens to be heard. We have 2 sheets filled out this evening. We go through the guidelines for citizens to be heard, and then I'll call those residents forward. Citizens to be heard is designed to gain input from the public and not for immediate responses by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The intent of this agenda item is to provide the public a platform to be thoughtfully heard and not a forum for dialogue, discussion, or verbal exchange with the board. While the board cannot assure each speaker of a specific or individualized future response, the board will consider the public comments and any supporting materials provided by the speaker. Public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per resident. Speakers are asked to refrain from using names of personnel or names of persons connected with the city, particularly when lodging a complaint. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, hearsay, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. The presiding board chair shall have sole authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to the board rules. When I call your name, you come forward, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Mr. Kevin Speed, please come forward and state your name and address for the board.
Kevin Speed, 9181 Forest Downs. This is pertaining to the Reeves Shafer zoning. I'm going to read a prepared statement. When I came before this board many months ago when this development was first being proposed, I mentioned that it was my recollection that citizens living in the Forest Hill area had negotiated in good faith with the city leaders and the property owners at the time for an agreement on this property. This was back in 2005. That in return for agreeing to enlarging the commercial corner of Poplar Pike and Forest Hill Irene, and also agreeing to a small R zoning buffer just behind this corner, we were promised by the city that the remaining acreage would remain 1 acre estate lots for a period of 20 years. That's how I remembered it, but I didn't have a copy of the agreement. After all, that was 13 years ago. At the time, Mayor, you told me you knew nothing of this agreement. You also told me that the politicians make promises they can't keep and that I didn't have this agreement in writing. At that time, I thought we might follow the same fate of promises made to the citizens living around Thornwood, who were told there would be condominiums developed there, but instead got apartments. Or the citizens living in Nottoway, who were led to believe there would not be a 6-story office building in their backyards. But thanks to Alderman Massey, he found a copy of the agreement, not only in writing, but in the city records no less. He also found the minutes from the BMA meeting dated January 9th of 06. These minutes referenced Ordinance 2005-21. The rezoning of the property located on the southeast quadrant of Forest Hill, Irene, and Poplar Pike. There was a written agreement by Charles Perkins, and it was entered into a covenant agreement with developer Mr. Ruhlman for a period of 20 years. It was then motioned by Mr. Palazzolo, seconded by Alderman Uhorn, and voted yes unanimously by the remaining aldermen. One would think this would be an agreement the city would honor, but now we roll the clock forward 13 years. And the rezoning of this property is the topic once again. Only now there are a few different members of the boards and commissions, particularly the planning and zoning commissions. These appointments include several builders and developers, in some instances former aldermen who were voted out of office by the citizens, but later conveniently appointed to commissions where they often vote in favor of projects that they will profit from personally. They also make generous campaign donations to several members of this board. So in closing, Mayor, you were wrong about us not having an agreement in writing, but you were right about one thing. Germantown politicians make promises they can't keep. Kevin Speed.
Thank you, Mr. Speed. Mr. Jim Jacobs, if you'd like to come forward.
Jim Jacobs, 7684 Apple Valley Road, 38138. Thank you for this opportunity. As you know, we have a public hearing this evening regarding the rezoning of the Cordova Triangle, and I intend to speak during that public hearing, and I know several other members of the audience and my neighbors also intend to speak. And in the interest of fairness and reasonableness, I would like to make a request regarding the conduction of that public hearing. We have been to public hearings in the past, most recently at the Planning Commission, and we have noted that typically speakers are timed. They're allowed typically 3 minutes to speak. And if we are going to time those individuals that are going to speak in favor of this rezoning tonight, we simply request on behalf of our neighbors that we also time and restrict the speakers against the rezoning to the same time limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate both citizens coming forward with their comments. That concludes citizens to be heard, and we move to the consent agenda this evening. Consent agenda was reviewed during executive session. I'll go through each item. Item 9A, acceptance of the FEMA AFG grant and purchase. Item 9B, purchase ammunition. Item 9C, purchase fuel. Item 9D, purchase performance management software renewal. Item 9E, wireless transmission facility modification located at 9715 Wolf River Boulevard and Spring Hollow Drive, MLG&W transmission tower located at the East Germantown Greenway. Item 9F, wireless transmission facility modification, equipment upgrade located at 3160 Forest Hill Irene Road. Item 9G, wireless transmission facility modification, equipment upgrade, 6989 Poplar Avenue. Item 9H, wireless transmission facility modification, equipment upgrade located at 7624 Poplar Pike at the Water Tower Complex. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Is there a motion?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Barziza,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Consent agenda carries. We move to item 10 on the agenda this evening. Ordinance 2018-10, rezoning of Cordova Triangle from T4 General Urban to R Single Family Residential, and an ordinance amendment to delete Cordova Triangle from the Central Business District Regulating Plan referred to in Section 23-756 and the zoning map in Section 23-824 of the Germantown Smart Code, second reading and public hearing. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. As stated by the mayor, this is the second reading and public hearing for the rezoning of the Cordova Triangle. The city originally rezoned the Central Business District as a whole in 2007 as part of the Central Business District Smart Growth Plan and overlaid the T4 General Urban Zoning District on the area that is collectively known as the Cordova Triangle. The 2007 rezoning of the CBD was adopted as a plan of zoning approvals. This regulating plan was referred to as referenced in the agenda title 23-756 and then the zoning map in 23-824. This is 824, and then this is the regulating plan referenced in 756. Majority of the developments included in the Central Business District were commercial in nature. However, the Cordova Triangle was zoned residential and did include occupied single-family homes. The Planning Commission voted to recommend the change in zoning from T4 to residential at their meeting on July 10th of 2018. Prior to 2007, as mentioned earlier, these parcels were zoned R. The T4 Smart Code overlay on the triangle consists of 6 homes located on lots of various sizes within the 22.9 acres that are to be rezoned as part of this request. The triangle parcels have remained single-family in their land use, as we discussed at the August meeting. The adjoining neighborhoods have remained largely unchanged west of Germantown Road during that same 11-year period. However, across Germantown Road to the east, there's been significant development within the Thornwood development, the Village at Germantown, Somerset, and the upcoming Grove at GPAC. As you know, Thornwood consists of mixed-use retail, residential, hotel. Somerset consists of 43 single-family homes that were built under the T3 Smart Code zoning designation. And then the expansion of the Village added 33 independent living units. And then the Grove expansion of GPAC will include an outdoor entertainment venue. As a result of these public and private developments around the area, the neighborhood has changed to the east of Germantown Road, but there has not been much change in the context and character of the existing neighborhoods within the T4 area around the triangle. And in going back and looking at that, in the interest of public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practice, the city is seeking to return the area to its original R zoning. And in doing so, the property and surrounding neighborhoods will be protected from any impact that could be occasioned from any high-density development of the triangle. The Germantown's Code of Ordinances, Section 2366, permits these changes in zoning districts whenever the public necessity, convenience, general welfare, good zoning practices justify such action. These basis for the zoning change can also include that the existing zoning is unwise, unjust, and erroneous, and that there was a mistake in the zoning or that there has been a change in the neighborhood. Tennessee courts, as noted in your agenda sheet, have determined the following criteria to help determine what is considered to be a change in the neighborhood. That there have been both changes in population in the area proposed as well as in the surrounding areas, changes in existing road patterns or traffic, including traffic volumes that are also included as part of development of new roadways in the vicinity, the need for rezoning based upon changes in whatever is classified as the neighborhood, and which may include changes in the population, development trends, and existing character of nearby property, and changes that have occurred in the character of nearby property, and then the effect of the requested zoning change on adjoining or nearby property. It's also noted that there have been no development applications. While there has been activity and there has been conversations, there's been no formal application for development projects on the Cordova Triangle in the last 11 years, while there have been changes across. This change in zoning request from the city is precipitated on the fact that maintaining the character and context of the surrounding neighborhoods aligns with the 2030 plan, as well as fulfilling the strategic objective of city experiencing positive trends and assessed value of residential areas. Open to any questions, both before or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there a motion to approve on second reading ordinance 2018-10, the rezoning of the Cordova Triangle from T4 General Urban to R Single Family Residential, and an ordinance amendment to delete Cordova Triangle from the Central Business District Regulating Plan referred to in Section 23-756 and the zoning map in Section 23-824 of the Germantown Smart Code?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. At this time, I would open a public hearing for anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this particular item. Can do so at this time. You neither need to declare whether you're for or against. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Anyone who would like to come forward, please come forward. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You can form a line if you like. Just make sure the green light is on and clearly state your name and or address for the record.
This green light or that green light?
The one at the bottom.
Okay. My name is Vince Alfonso Jr. I live at 1798 Hayden. I've been a resident of Germantown for pushing 18 years. I'm here to offer a different approach to the triangle. I have spoken with the mayor about it. I've spoken with several other people just to share my thoughts with them, and I appreciate their attentive ear. What I'd like to see is for the triangle to remain a nature wildlife preserve. In order to do that, of course, the owners would have to be fairly compensated for their property at probably the highest value it would be appraised at for obvious reasons. If it went residential, it would be for much lower value than commercial. So number one, I propose to form basically a committee of sorts that would look into getting those funds together. I've spoken with several conservative groups around the country, conservation groups, excuse me, who've expressed interest in helping assist in doing that, and several corporations who have some interest in seeing that come about. So phase one would be to acquire the property into basically a not-for-profit foundation or sorts or corporation that would own the property. Secondly, it would be cleaned of all of its invasive species, such as was done with the Overton Park Conservancy when they took the old forest over at Overton Park. And then once that was done, then there would be an endowment fund arranged so that the area could be maintained in perpetuity and no burden on the taxpayers of Germantown. I would think that the only real objection to that would be the fact that it could be viewed as producing significant revenues for the city and its tax situation. And I guess I would be on the side of those who feel, if there are any besides me, that we have a really good tax base, and that one piece of land is such a special piece of land that I don't know that it has to be a revenue producer for the city of Germantown to realize its future in our community, in my opinion. So if there's any interest from anyone in the audience, and that's why I came tonight, or anyone else who would like to explore this further, I would love to be a part of that. And I think it's really doable. There's a property in Nashville that just had something like this happen, and it was the very same scenario where development was proposed. Others spoke up that they wanted to keep it natural. They raised the funds, and they basically put the same thing together so that it could remain a natural piece of land and not developed. So that's what I came for, and I appreciate the audience and being able to express it. And if anyone's interested, or if anybody on the council is interested, I'd love to chair that committee or just be a part of it. So,
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. Next speaker, please. Go ahead, come forward. State your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Pat Wilczek, 10777 Monterey Woods Cove. Zip code is 38028. I've got a little something here prepared. Mayor and Board of Aldermen, on August 27, 2018, at the first reading of the ordinance of 2018-10, the rezoning of the Cordova Triangle from the T4 general urban to R single-family residential. An ordinance amendment to delete the Cordova Triangle from the CBD regulating plan in the Germantown Smart Code. The minutes state, in part, that the parcels have remained single-family residential in their land use since the adoption of the Smart Code, and that the neighborhoods has changed due to the concentration of vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic, as well as anticipated high levels of citizen participation in the area when considering the context and character of the existing neighborhoods, and that this form of development would no longer be wise community development. By returning the area to its original R residential zoning, the property and the surrounding neighborhoods will be protected from any impact that would be occasioned from high-density development of the triangle. Many reasons to support this issue have been written, but our family, the Owen family, and the owners of the property with boundaries on Germantown Road, Neshoba Road, and Cordova Road would like to go on record and state the true reason why there has been no development to this point. On the advice of our attorneys, we were advised not to proceed with any development until such time as my father-in-law, Mr. Owen, passed, and he did so on August of 2016. Since then, we've had 2 proposals. Another, which we are currently looking at, with residential along the frontages of Cordova Road and Neshoba Road, across from the existing residential, exactly as approved by the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor Aldermen several years ago. It is wise and a courtesy to the existing neighborhoods to follow the same philosophy of development as earlier that was put in place. When the Smart Code was entertained in 2007, it was the city that chose and approved the current zoning patterns. The city studied, analyzed all means of impact upon the adjacent neighborhoods at that time, including but not limited to commercial areas,
30 seconds,
schools, infrastructure, and traffic. Our family supported the city's decision for mixed development because we agreed it would be advantageous to the economic, social, and environmental bottom line that Germantown had its vision. After significant public participation and commission recommendations, the Board of Mayor Aldermen voted to move forward, and our family supported the city. As a long-standing family in this community, we placed our faith in the city and showed our support. Now it appears that the city has turned on what it worked so hard to be. Our family is disappointed in this turn of events.
Please conclude your comments.
Vote against these changes to the voting of the track lane.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm Missy Brooks, 8723 Windrush. My family owns 14 acres of the triangle, same family. Because of false beliefs, no one knows the truth anymore. The application says no developments have come forward in the last decade, and I'm going to be repeating some of what Pat said. This is proof that the zoning is erroneous. That's what the application said. A falsehood that keeps being repeated. So people started believing that it's true. As we've said, we've had interested parties, but legal advice said hold on until the passing of our father, the owner to avoid step-up taxes. Thornwood was owned by the heirs, so these taxes didn't apply. We have not marketed this property. The planning director said our land is not economically viable But in the last 2 years, we've had 2 contracts, one canceled because of the moratorium, and we still have developers calling. As the director said at the first reading, T4 is limited in nature and not high density. You are aware we paid $1.5 million in estate taxes, owned by our family for a century, named the home place by our grandparents. If sold as residential, would be a total loss, as after subtracting estate taxes and giving up that contract. Residents have told us they like the idea, and here's another idea from what Pat had said, a treed park along Cordova with the village square like Mountain Brook in Birmingham, which I spoke of earlier, with retail, office, and cafes. Despite a robust economy, a few people are trying to instill fear of building anything but houses, which hurts future revenue needed to sustain a high level of services in schools. 11 years of inactivity without a formal application, you know the reason. The director said it should be residential because it's an Evel Knievel jump across Germantown Road, but then says there's going to be a walkover bridge. Calls it a canyon, very dangerous, but then expects people to build their homes along the canyon. Doesn't make sense to say that east of Germantown Road can move forward, but not the west side, since Saddle Creek and the large Miller property are doing just that. A change in traffic? Not true. No new traffic study was done. The same 50,000 cars a day travel your gateway.
30 seconds.
Germantown Forward studies predicted manageable traffic patterns for the developed area. The rezoning decision here is not based in facts. City leaders don't have to tolerate threats and intimidation by a minority. Their job is to cease unfair targeting and uphold justice for property owners. Lastly, without documented studies, you say it was simply a mistake. Area residents, in a year-long taxpayer-funded study by highly qualified land planners, concluded otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. Please state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Sarah Freeman, 7684 Appahon Lane. And I am here to support the removal of the T4 Smart Growth Overlay from the Cordova Road Triangle and the removal of the triangle from the CBD regulating plan, and then to return the triangle to the original zoning of single-family residential R only. I support the city's actions thus far in removing T4 from the triangle because it was wrong to allow such an extreme and potentially dangerous upzoning in the first place. We live there. Public safety in our neighborhood should be the highest priority. Increased cut-through traffic from dense development, which we will see more of, puts our lives at risk and especially endangers children walking to and from Riverdale Elementary School. Many who live in the vicinity have fought this urban development for 11 years, and there's a strong record of this history of dissent. As some of you know, I took it upon myself beginning in 2007 to videotape many of the city's meetings about smart growth, especially when the 2 Owens tracks, the Cordova Road Triangle and what is now Thornwood across the street, when those 2 tracks were involved. As a result, I have an extensive multimedia archive of video, audio recordings, and documents, many obtained through the Tennessee Open Records Act. These tell the story of what the public was originally told they would be getting with smart growth in 2007 and 2008, and what they actually got. These show that the extreme change in the neighborhood that is Thornwood was not what was envisioned in the original small area plan, nor was it what was actually zoned. As a result, its impact on nearby neighborhoods is quite different from what Germantown residents were led to expect by city officials and developers. Allowing urban development on the triangle across the street from Thornwood would exacerbate and magnify the damage done by Thornwood. There are numerous reasons as to why the T4 zoning of the triangle was and remains a mistake.
Therefore, I am offering to the City of Germantown and its legal representatives access to my archives so that they may use these materials as evidence to thwart any legal challenges to the removal of T4 from the triangle. No matter who wins the election, they will be given access to the rather extraordinary story of this 10-year slow-motion disaster that has brought us here tonight. I believe that after studying these materials and obtaining certain materials obtained through discovery, a reasonable person would find that the removal of T4 from the Cordova Triangle is the right and legal thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. Please come to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes after you state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Laura Tresvant, 6606 London Drive, Memphis. I'll put my glasses on. I'm also going to read a prepared statement. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My niece and I purchased the commercial property at the southernmost tip of the Cordova Triangle, consisting of approximately 0.65 acres on April the 25th, 2017, after several meetings with the city assuring us not only could we, but we were required to build a commercial building per the 2007 adopted SMART Code. We hired an architect recommended by the city and submitted the plans to the city. Not once in any of the 4 meetings, nor numerous phone calls with the city was it ever mentioned there was an effort to backzone this property. We would obviously not have paid a commercial price for a property we knew was going to end up being residential. At an R zoning, our property currently generates $1,166 per year in revenue for the city. Zone T4, we can create an appraised value in excess of $2.5 million with a new beautiful landscape 9,100 square foot building. Commercial property assessed at 40% of appraised value increases my property taxes to $19,500, representing an increase of well over $18,000 per year to the city for not even a 3/4 of an acre parcel. Additional revenues also created, obviously, by the sales taxes, business tax, professional privilege taxes, etc. Thornwood took a 10-acre parcel and created a $35 million value. 41 of the 43 lots are already sold, so you can't come up with the argument that nobody wants to live there. The values climb daily. The next closing is a home of $1 million. That property now generates $360,000 just in property tax revenue alone. More than 3/4 of the new residents were from out of state or from surrounding areas outside of Germantown, so very much a net gain for the city, as new residents generate more spending and attract more services and restaurants to seek a Germantown location. Residents were attracted to the development because of the commercial amenities created by the new zoning, exactly what was intended. To put the Cordova Triangle on appropriate terms for generating city tax revenue, we are a 20-acre parcel, considering the whole triangle, potentially with the ability to generate $560,000 per year just from property taxes alone. That's almost $6 million for the city of Germantown over the next 10 years. Again, that's exactly what was intended. The decision to reverse approvals and zoning has and will have a huge snowball effect on the city. Already, Murray Foster, an active broker in the city of Germantown, also involved with Thornwood development, has had 3 large developers cancel
30
contracts
seconds.
for development in Germantown. They don't trust the money they will spend to prepare the site will be presented will be put to good use, and they don't want to take a risk on Germantown development at this time. I think I can create something wonderful there that the neighborhood would agree to, and I would appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Jay Brooks, 8723 Windrush, Memphis. At the first reading for the rezoning of the triangle, the board wanted to express their thanks to the people that did the research and studies for the rezoning, downzoning, I should say. In fact, there were no new studies that were done. The city is relying on the research done in 2006 and 2007. That the smart people brought us the smart growth prepared. That research resulted in unanimous approval, of which some of you were highly involved. The only recent document in the file is the application to rezone,
and it's incomplete with none of the required documentation. So the thanks that you requested at the first meeting goes to the people from 2006 and 2007. 12 years ago. We keep hearing that Germantown Road is a barrier. What about Poplar? Busiest road in the city. And yet you've got smart growth on both sides. We hear there's been no activity. What about the Tresvant purchase? You're charged with the responsibility of doing what's best for all citizens of Germantown. If a city planner were to be honest with himself or herself, he or she would never say that this is the best use of that land. Your city's landlocked. Look at the 2019 budget. The increase in the city debt, spending and utility rates going up. The last reading in Alderman was practically begging for an answer on record of why this zoning is considered unwise, and does the city have a good reason to downzone? He got no response. The board uses the example the neighborhood has changed. It has, because you voted for the change. You wanted to maximize revenue for the city to sustain it. This last little plot of land could generate close to $80 million to the city over the next 20 years. Not something to take lightly.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, if you'd like to come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Herschel Freeman, 7684 Appahan Lane in Germantown. I've been coming here to speak for years, and I don't often see eye to eye with some of you. But I am glad we finally found an issue we can all agree on, changing the zoning on the Cordova Triangle back to single-family residential. It was a mistake in the first place to force the smart growth overlay onto this property. It was a misunderstanding of the nature of the real estate and the character of the neighborhood. This is not just a tract in a residential area. It is in the midst of a long-settled community surrounding one of our premier elementary schools. The property owners had over 10 years to find a commercial developer to buy the land from them, but they could never do it, and the heartfelt activism of the people affected played a major role. Now that Thornwood has indelibly changed the dynamic of the surrounding area and provided a natural divider along with Germantown Road for commercial on one side and residential on the other, it has become so obvious a solution that even those of you who supported the smart growth overlay have changed your minds. We hope that this is a harbinger of positive things to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak on this particular item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi. Jennifer Baker, 7693 Appahan Lane. I've been a baker for a few years, but I married into it, but our home has been in the Baker family for almost 50 years. So my husband, it was his grandparents' home, and he grew up running around there, and it actually backs up to the triangle. We can see the triangle out our den and kitchen, so we have a bird's eye view of it every day. Our neighborhood, Neshoba North, recognized even prior to adopting smart growth that the Cordova Triangle should not be lumped in with the smart growth adoption and the central business district. We have remained vigilant on our stance and reminded city staff and administration at every opportunity that in order to preserve the character of our neighborhood, the triangle should remain residential. We appreciate that with hindsight and the passage of time, the BMA is willing to revisit this topic, and we urge you to make it right. I heard someone address this body and claim that only a small group of vocal Facebook members are voicing the stance that the triangle should be R, but that is most definitely not the case. As this body knows, our neighborhood has been fighting tirelessly to be heard on this topic for over 11 years. A standing room only plus an overflow crowd of citizens showed up at the January 8 BMA meeting this year after our neighborhood was approached about a 200 multi-family apartment unit without any mixed-use element on the triangle. We are not a small group. We consist of over 470 homes, and we have consistently and persistently spoken out against dense urban development on the triangle. The past 11 years of no triangle projects coming to the city, 175 million of changes across Germantown Road, and the Germantown Road Divide, which sees 50,000 cars per day, strengthens our argument for the triangle to be zoned R. During the July Planning Commission meeting, one commissioner recalled being involved when the triangle was originally zoned T4, and she recalled having misgivings even at that time 11 years ago about the T4 zoning. The Owen family pitched the triangle as a destination area with green space, but this does not align with the developer who came to us the week of Christmas last year with the request to discuss apartments with 200 units and no mixed-use element. We were willing to listen, and we did meet with the Owen family in the spring. After meeting with them, they were to come back to us within 30 days with ideas, and we never heard from them. I also want to address the tree canopy on Cordova Road. I was surprised that after talking to many neighbors, they were willing to forfeit the tree canopy to keep the character of the neighborhood as residential. Many did not think the triangle, the trees would survive construction, and then where would we be? In that meeting with the Owen family, one triangle owner who actually still resides on the triangle expressed her fear for the health of the trees. A huge tree actually fell a year ago.
30 seconds.
From the triangle across Cordova Road. There was no storm or rain at the time, it just fell on a Sunday morning. There are many of our neighbors who do think that we could still work with a buffer even with the residential zoning. So I would like to thank you for looking at a past decision through a current lens, and I urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward to speak? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Don Lossing, 1475 Cordova Road. I'm the current president of the Neshoba North Neighborhood Association. I'm speaking in support of the measure that is at hand before this board tonight. I thank this board for your favorable consideration of the proposal of the rezoning of the triangle property to residential designation. Thank you that you have seen the error of 10 years ago when the property was covered with the smart growth overlay. Considering the significant fact that there are considerable residents on two sides of the triangle and upon itself, as well as it's surely an argument that the property should not be vulnerable to the type of development that we see with Thornwood. Additionally, the heart of downtown Germantown should not be vulnerable to the increased traffic congestion that Thornwood type development would surely bring. There have been other ideas floated here tonight for the property. Again, I speak to the measure that is before the board tonight and ask for its favorable consideration. Let common sense and integrity prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak to the board? Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Jim Jacobs, 7684 Apple Valley Road, 38138 in Germantown. What you're deciding tonight is a very simple question. Was a mistake made in 2007 or not? The Planning Commission met, considered this in great detail, and determined that indeed a mistake was made in 2007, that the Cordova Triangle should never have been part of the Central Business District. It doesn't make any sense for it to be there. Some of those members that spoke and said, some of the commissioners that said it was a mistake in 2007 were members of that commission back then, okay? So several of my neighbors have spoken tonight about the reasons why there was a mistake made and why we should correct the mistake, and that is not why I'm here tonight. Others have spoken against this rezoning proposal, and I could make a good case against each one of the arguments that they have brought forward to you, but I am limited in my time that I can speak with you, and you have heard those arguments before. So I want to address a different issue. What I want to address is what is the right thing to do. This board is an elected board. It is elected by the voters of the city of Germantown. It is to represent, the duty of this board, as you well know, is to represent those citizens of this community that have voted for you. It is not to represent everyone who comes before you with an interest in this property, whether it be financial or some other means. It is to represent those that are residents and voting members of this community. In this particular case, essentially all of those that spoke to oppose this situation are not members of this community. They are developers and persons with a financial interest only. You and I, the citizens of this city, and the elected officials of this city have to live every day with the decisions that you make. Those that spoke against this do not have to live with those decisions. They can go home to their other communities. I want you to consider this situation and, excuse me, I have spoken in the past with each of you individually, and at that time, every one of you has made a commitment to me that you would vote for the rezoning back to our residential of the Cordova Triangle.
Please begin
at
to
this
conclude
point,
your remarks.
I ask you and charge you to fulfill that commitment, to rezone this property, and to support your vote in any future legal challenge that may come before the city regarding this vote. Thank you
sir.
Very much.
Anyone else like to come forward and speak to the board? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Donna Yakubian, and for 26 years, my family and I have lived in the Triangle. And except for a few improvements, some of the houses recently that face Germantown Road, we're the only people who have done any improvements on the Triangle. We live there, it's our home. Our son lives across the street in a home that we helped renovate, and another son lives down the street on Cobblestone Cove. So this is really where we live. I personally did not want it zoned. The T4, we only agreed to that because we felt like that was self-defense, because we had no choice. We were either going to have it zoned we were going to be a buffer between whatever was going to be at the bottom of the triangle, or we're going to be a buffer from the top of the triangle. And so that's the only reason we didn't fight the zoning. So now I really do want something developed on that property. That property is a dense, unkept forest. It's not pretty. It's stealing my light. It's stealing my airspace. I can't see the sky. My neighbor who lives just to the north of me, her whole side of her house is green from moss because it never gets any daylight. And this whole idea about this canopy being so thrilling for people who drive through there, for me it is dangerous and dark, and it's just an accident waiting to happen, and it could be my own family. My children and my grandchildren live between my house and the canopy to Neshoba. So I do not support completely changing the zoning. I think it's okay with me if it's somewhat dense residential, like just to the north of the River Oaks Presbyterian Church. That's a beautiful development, and I would not be opposed to that, and I don't think any of our neighbors would be opposed to that. but I want something done on it because it's not pretty. I don't think it's something that we want to turn into any kind of wildlife preservation area. That's not fair for the people who own the property. They need to have their value in that property. And frankly, it's full of raccoons and snakes and possums and deer that eat our vegetation. They roll up our grass. And it's not, everybody acts like this is some kind of beautiful thing that the community is really enjoying. I'm going to tell you, I live in it. I'm not enjoying it. So I am for the Owen family, if they can come to some agreement with some developer that wants to
30
do
seconds.
some nice residential, I would like to see that. I don't think leaving it the way it is beneficial to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking this evening. Anyone else like to come forward and speak to the board on this particular matter? Anyone else? Third and final call. See no one come forward. That concludes the public hearing portion of this agenda item. It's been properly motioned and in second. Now it's open for discussion or questions of staff. Vice Mayor?
Just a conversation that we've had, it seems like for the better part of the last 8 months or so. January 8th was a pivotal night. I did make that proposal to remove the T4 overlay, which would revert the land back to single-family residential only. The mayor directed the staff to begin that process. Cameron, I appreciate your efforts in leading that. Don't have any questions. As for these last months where we have met, conversations with Mr. Don Lossing, Jim Jacobs, Jennifer Baker, all who've spoken tonight, and others that represented both Neshoba North and Germantown Heights. It is because of your advocacy that we are here. For me, those key factors that propelled me, Ms. Baker spoke of them earlier, the tipping point came when that developer asked for the meeting prior to Christmas, the week of Christmas. It was ultimately a project that never made application to the city, and it caused angst and worry. Again, in over a decade, almost 11 years, there hasn't been a project filed with the city to develop these triangle parcels. I heard something that I had not heard before in the Citizens to be Heard conversation as far as why that was the case. I had not heard that before. However, my stance has not changed. I want you to know that. I still support removing this back to residential only.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other questions, comments for staff? Alderman Owens.
Sure. I'll be brief, Mayor. I've been through this now several times at the Planning Commission and also at first reading, and my reasons are the same as I stated in both of those meetings, and that, just read my statement, and that is, the reasons I'm voting to rezone this property are similar to those stated in the application by the city. The property is unique in comparison to other smart growth properties throughout the city, and that is why it merits special attention. I believe that the principles of smart growth, including walkability and bikeability, are limited, somewhat limited by the major roadway of Germantown Road, and the fact that we do not have any, or have not had any development occur on the property, rather this property, in the years since the rezoning, while the changes in the neighborhood across the street have been dramatic, lead me to believe that we've made an error in zoning the property in this manner, and I plan to vote yes to rezone it to R.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Sure. No, Mayor, I do have comments.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I didn't
Go
know you
ahead.
didn't recognize me.
Alderman Massey, go ahead.
I think the owners of the triangle have left, Ms. Tresvant's still here. So first, I want to say I empathize with the owners of the triangle, and I'm sorry for your difficulties. I mean, I think somebody needs to say that. I'm not speaking on behalf of the city necessarily, but I do want to say that to you and the other owners. Next, I think the city owes an apology to the neighbors of the Cordova Triangle who lived 11 years under a cloud of fear that they would one day wake up to find a dense urban development with apartments towering over their homes. And let me go back a minute. I was asked to refrain by leaders in Neshoba North and the administration tonight from making extensive comments about the rezoning of the triangle, but I want to assure the residents in the nearby areas that I am prepared to make a strong case for rezoning the triangle to residential at the third reading, but my comments tonight will be brief as a result of the request I received. I also want to say that say thank you to the residents who never stopped fighting to expose the unfairness that was created when city officials created the urban density plan known as Smart Growth. Sarah Freeman in particular deserves special recognition for her research and tenacity. Sarah, thank you. As public officials, we are stewards of the public trust, which means we are required to put the public's interests first. I think city officials failed to put the public's interest first when they replaced the Triangle's traditional residential zoning with smart growth zoning to allow developers to increase profits by increasing density on this small parcel of land at the corner of Neshoba and Germantown Road. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other comments? Alderman Barzizzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I look at the situation, having talked with many of the, back in late November, December, early December, something like that nature, met with a considerable number of folks, and at that point in time, I made the determination that I just couldn't support any development on the Cordova Triangle. Having heard the fact that there was going to be a potential crossover, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, you go to places where there are crossovers over busy highways, people try to cut corners by crossing the street anyway. It's a potential hazard of life. And we certainly don't want to have something crossing over Germantown Road where that expanse, and the cost would be unbelievable. Then you've got ADA issues on top of that, trying to get people who are confined to wheelchairs or have to use walkers, what have you. So I think this has been a wise move on the part of the Planning Commission to revert back to R, realizing that they did make a mistake back in 2007. I fully concur with their decision, and I will be voting yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Measure passes, moves to third and final reading, which will be October the 8th. Brings us to item number 11 on the agenda this evening, Ordinance 2018-5, rezoning of the Reeves Shafer property located at 3258 Forest Hill Irene Road and 9190 Winding Oak Way from C1 Neighborhood Commercial and RE1 Residential Estate to R Residential Zoning, third and final reading. Mr. Ross.
Thank you again, Mayor, members of the board. The request in front of you is the third reading for rezoning of a small portion of neighborhood commercial C1 and a larger portion of residential estate to the residential estate 1, rather, to the R single-family residential. The rezoning in total for 32.14 acres consists of slivers of C1 and a majority of RE1. The entire property is 41.78 acres with 6.8 acres already zoned R residential, and then a 2.8 acre portion in which the existing house at 9190 Winding Oak Way will remain RE1 residential estate. Just as a little bit of background, this is the existing conditions plan for the area. As you can see, the existing house and Winding Oak Way is down in the southeast corner of the development area. The rezoning plan consists of a small sliver of C1 that would be rezoned to R, and then the remaining area would be rezoned to R. And then, as stated previously, this 2.8 acre would remain RE1 residential estate. The concept site plan meets all of the regulations and intent. Just kind of going back in time, the Oak subdivision which was recorded in unincorporated Shelby County in 1987, only had the existing house built in 1988 at 9190 Winding Oak Way. The rest of the property remained vacant. In July of 2000, this property was annexed into the city of Germantown per Ordinance 2000-10 and incorporated into the city of Germantown as RE1 residential estate zoning. In January of 2006, this board approved a rezoning after 3 readings, which included portions of the subject property to be rezoned from the RE1 residential estate to the C1 neighborhood commercial at the corner and to residential where it's currently zoned residential, that's 6.8 acres, in order to allow for more development opportunities. Prior to this approval, as referenced in the minutes from January of 2006, the property owners and surrounding neighbors signed a private covenant agreement regarding future rezoning and development of the property, and this was sent to the city in October of 2007. In May of 2006, the Planning Commission approved the Weldon Woods subdivision. The subdivision included what you see up on the board, which was 4 detention areas and 33 lots. There were 11 lots zoned under the residential zoning and 22 under the RE1 zoning. In May of 2006, this board approved the development contract 474. However, construction plan approval was never completed after approval of that development contract, and the subdivision was never developed, and the property has remained unimproved. Fast forward to December of 2017, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the zoning request. In February of 2018, the board heard the first reading of the zoning request and held a public hearing. In March of 2018, administration requested to postpone this item to consider previous history and research on this property. It was confirmed as part of the research that a private covenant had been drafted, signed, but never recorded by a previous developer. In September of 2018, the current property owners, which includes the Reeves family partnership and the Shafer family, along with the developer John Duke, agreed to a restrictive covenant agreement that will limit the lot sizes and limit the number of lots on the property. This is item 8 in your packet tonight. The restrictive covenant agreement has been signed by the developer and owners of the property as applicants for this zoning change and a number of neighbors. Again, included is at attachment 8 in your packet. Attachment 9 is a more abbreviated property history on what I just went over. But just to touch on the restrictive covenant agreement, of which the city has no interest in terms of a signature, the limitation is to the number of lots in terms of 75 total, and this is also summarized in your agenda sheet. Each of the lots 1 through 29 shall not be any less than 7,000 square foot each, and widths not to be less than 52 feet. There shall be a 15-foot easement backyard green space for lots 29 through 34, upon which no construction or physical improvement will be placed. All other lots shall not be less than 21,000 square feet, and the homes built shall comply with minimum square footage requirements that are referenced within the restrictive covenant agreement attachment 8. So if the rezoning is approved on third reading tonight, the application for site plan under the new zoning approved and considering the restrictive covenant agreement could be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Again, the concept plan that we showed earlier was just to show how the property could be developed under the requested zoning as required by 23226, so that no request would be approved without any conceptual development plan for the rezoning of this area. That concludes our staff's presentation. If there are any questions, happy to answer those. The applicant, Mr. Duke, is here. As mentioned in the executive session, Mr. Harris spoke with Mr. Lakey, the property owner's representative, and they have filed the executed document that was included as Attachment 8 that was executed, signed, notarized. It is legal and filed, recorded with the Shelby County Register at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there a motion to approve on third and final reading ordinance 2018-5, the rezoning of the Reeves Shafer property located at 3258 Forest Hill Irene Road and 9190 Winding Oak Way from C1 Neighborhood Commercial and RE1 Residential Estate to R Residential Zoning?
So moved.
Is a motion?
I'll second it.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions for staff? Vice Mayor.
Mr. Harris, you mentioned the restrictive covenant that was entered into privately with the homeowners and the developer. That was recorded, I believe you said, when I asked you earlier, right. It was on Friday,
yes,
correct?
Yes, it was recorded Friday and a copy provided to us today.
Correct, and that's a dated, stamped
yes.
proof.
I have it.
Thank you. That's important because the question about the restrictive covenant from 13 years ago that we have discussed, Mr. Ross, if you're looking up a piece of property on the Register of Deeds website and it lists what the restrictive covenants are only if it has been recorded, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So this file in over 13 years, how thick? This thick? This thick?
This thick?
Okay.
About 4 inches. As we discussed in the timeline and Attachment 9 references, there's a lot of history to this property, a lot of plans, a lot of false starts.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Alderman Massey.
Mayor, I would just ask that the board allow me some additional time to read my comments in so that I can take my time from the second round and just apply that to the first round. I was asked to refrain from making extensive comments for the triangle, but I didn't get that request for the Reeves Shafer property, and I would like to state all my reasons for opposing the rezoning. So if the board would give me probably an extra 5 minutes, I would appreciate it.
You have 10 minutes in round 1 and 10 minutes in round 2. You can break it up if you like.
I'd prefer not to break it up, Mayor. Can we do that? Or are you going to limit me to the 10 minutes?
You have the floor currently. Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to begin by saying I support the right of landowners and developers to develop their properties, but I do not support city officials arbitrarily changing the rules anytime a developer wants to use zoning that is different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of other owners. The existing zoning is in place to protect the character of the existing neighborhoods, and it should not be changed simply because a landowner or developer want to make more money using a different zoning scheme. This evening, I stand with the many Germantown families who oppose the rezoning of the Reeves Shafer's property to allow the developer to double the number of lots that were previously planned for the property. Residents should not have the burden to justify the existing zoning. Nevertheless, on multiple occasions, the residents have shown up in great numbers to provide evidence and speak in support of keeping the Reeves Shafer property zoned residential estate. This board should not disregard the promises, precedents, and zoning ordinances that were established by previous boards with the intent to preserve the residential estate zoning for this area when it was annexed into the city of Germantown. The presumption should be that the existing residential estate zoning is valid. The burden should be on the applicant to justify a change to the existing zoning. Memphis developer John Duke is the applicant requesting the rezoning of the Reeves property. Mr. Duke executed an option to purchase the Reeves Shafer property with the knowledge that the property was zoned residential estate and PUDs were prohibited. Nevertheless, after securing the rights to purchase the property, Mr. Duke applied to the city to have the property rezoned from residential estate to residential with the intent of being able to develop the property as a PUD and eventually increase the number of lots from 33 to 117. In the remainder of my time, I will attempt to explain why I believe the current applicant has failed to provide sufficient justification for the board to rezone the property to allow for smaller lots and greater density. Based on the city's official records, Mr. Duke, directly or through his representative, attempted to use the following as his justification for rezoning the Reeves Shafer property. Mr. Duke believes the school board's purchase of the adjoining property for a new elementary school represents a significant change in use to the surrounding area. Mr. Duke contends the new school will cut off Reeves Shafer property from the residential estate subdivision south of the school. Mr. Duke believes the widening of Forest Hill Irene will significantly change the traffic patterns and character of the neighborhood. Mr. Duke believes the market of estate lots has waned over the years and the property will not be developed as estate lots if his application and development are denied. Mr. Duke believes his purchase of the property is the best option for the Shafer family to recover their investment in their home near the new school site. Mr. Duke believes the proximity of the new school will enable him to create a neighborhood with smaller, affordable homes that he can sell to parents who are eager to move to Germantown so their children can attend the new school. Mr. Duke believes that estate lots and homes are too expensive and not conducive to having families or neighborhood schools. Mr. Duke believes the new school should be near a neighborhood zoned for residential or greater density because neighborhoods near Germantown's existing schools are similarly zoned for residential or greater density. At the February 12, 2018 meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, Mr. Duke explained that he decided to purchase the Reeves Shafer property after speculating that the adjoining property would be purchased as the new school site for the elementary school, which might create an opportunity for him to have the property rezoned. Mr. Duke explained that he applied to the city to have the property rezoned from residential estate to residential because he wanted to create a neighborhood school, or rather create a neighborhood for a new school. And in order to do this, he believed he needed to be able to build affordable homes on smaller lots because, in his opinion, estate lots and homes were too expensive and not conducive to having families or neighborhood schools. Mr. Duke also noted that he would like to have the ability to have higher density because he didn't believe he could sell expensive homes against the railroad track. At the March 12, 2018 BMA meeting, Mr. Duke advised the board that the estate lots would not happen if this did not get passed. In Mr. Duke's opinion, the new school made estate lots undesirable, and he felt like it was time to put this land to work generating revenue and create a neighborhood filled with lights, a sense of community, safety, and parks. Mr. Duke said the development would fulfill his vision, and he believed the current overcrowding of Germantown schools was evidence that his plan works. He then gave an example of a friend's child who had been denied admission to one of Germantown's schools because of the overcrowding. Mr. Duke said people love Germantown schools, which is fantastic for him because he can sell every house near a Germantown school because everyone wants to live there. Mr. Duke also said the people that are most affected by this decision are the Shafers, whom he said built a beautiful home not knowing the school was going to be built on the adjoining land. Mr. Duke said the family had joined in with him, saying this was their best option to recover their investment in their home. As part of the approval process, Mr. Duke was required by law to provide written justification for rezoning the Reeves Shafer property from residential estate lots to smaller residential lots. As the applicant's justification for rezoning the property, the applicant's representative wrote a letter that stated, "It is our belief that the market for estate-sized lots has waned in recent years, and two, with the recent sale of the school land to the south, we feel this is a significant change in use to the surrounding area. I contend the developer's speculative beliefs and feelings are not sufficient justification for the rezoning of the Reeves Shafer property. Furthermore, Mr. Duke's beliefs about the previous market or lack thereof for estate-sized lots is irrelevant to the justification for the zoning change today. In addition, the applicant presented no evidence of significant detriment to himself or others from the existing residential estate zoning. There is also no evidence that the existing zoning is incompatible with the neighborhood, including the new school and any resulting change in the character of the neighborhood. Frankly, the residents in the neighborhood previously showed up in overwhelming numbers to say that it is actually the applicant's rezoning that would be detrimental to the character of their existing neighborhoods. The sale of the adjoining property to the school board will change the use of the property where the school will be located, but the institutional use on that property does not justify the rezoning of the surrounding residential neighborhood. In fact, I think the presence of the elementary school actually supports the existing zoning with fewer lots, which will have less impact on traffic and the character of the existing neighborhood that was historically zoned residential estate. I think it sets a dangerous precedent for government to use an indirect action, such as the selection of the school site, to justify another government action, such as rezoning the area around the school. Zoning ordinance should also serve to bind the government as a means of preserving the character of our community for future generations. The future development of our community should not be determined by the arbitrary whims of developers and politicians who may act in their own best interest rather than the public interest. Residents could not control that the mayor's administration and school board would select the property that would cut off the Reeves Shafer property from the residential estate subdivision to the south. The developer is now using the result of the government's forced division of these properties as part of his justification for the Reeves Shafer property being rezoned from residential estate to residential. The record shows that city officials intended for this area to be zoned for residential estate when they annexed it into the city of Germantown. And greater harmony would be created by keeping the Reeves Shafer property zoned residential estate. The developer stated that by changing the use to allow for the new school, the government created the perfect opportunity to develop a subdivision where families can live near a school that their children can safely walk to and attend. I do not find this argument persuasive, as it simply sounds like the developer is using this new school as an excuse to enable him to ignore the city's existing zoning so he can increase the number of new homes he can market to new families who want to live next to the new school. The BMA should not set the precedents for all properties in the city to be considered candidates for rezoning simply because they become available for speculation or development.
30 seconds.
The applicant provided no evidence that homes built on estate-sized lots near the new elementary school will not be marketable in the future. Mr. Duke said he simply wants to create a neighborhood for the new school. In order to do this, he believed he needed to be able to build affordable homes on smaller lots because, in his opinion, estate lots and homes were too expensive and not conducive to having families or neighborhood schools. I'll continue my comments in the second round, I guess, unless the board will allow me to continue. The other aldermen allow me the rest of my time.
We don't have that rule here, so that concludes the comments for this period. Anyone? Forrest?
Yep. It's actually Alderman Owens.
Alderman Owens.
Just messing with you, Mayor. A little levity there. Yes, I would simply say this. Mr. Duke's property aside, it is my belief that rezoning property, which is a method of the city has used since we became a municipality. We rezone property all the time for various and justified reasons. But rezoning to to lots that are slightly smaller, and I guess in this case 21,000, which is in excess of the 15,000 square foot lots that our zoning would dictate, or minimally dictate, adjacent to a school, makes good land use planning sense. And in order to create a neighborhood school, that is what we see throughout the city of Germantown. As Alderman Massey mentioned, there are every school within the city of Germantown has lots around it, surrounding it, that are 15,000 square foot lot size. I believe that's correct. Let's see. There are creating a place for families to be there in close proximity to a school where they can walk. It just makes good land use planning sense, in my humble opinion. I would say that I applaud the work of the residents to come to an agreement with Mr. Duke and to work on that. Mr. Speed, I met with you on 2 occasions, I believe, out there and tried to hear your concerns and tried to work through and see what we could work out. And so I appreciate all the advocacy you've provided us. But it is my opinion that with the selection of this site adjacent to school, with the selection of the school site rather, adjacent to this property, as well as the roadway widening, that provides further justification for the rezoning. As I've stated, this is really, I haven't changed my position, I guess, since the first reading. It just makes good land use planning sense, in my humble opinion. And so I'll be voting for it, and those are my comments.
Thank you. Alderman Yonda?
Yes, I have a question for Cameron. Keep bringing up all these covenants and stuff. How many signatures were on the original 2006 city signatures? I don't know how we're responsible for covenants by any means or bylaws of other, that people set up.
As a private covenant, the city never made any agreement as part of it in 2006, nor are we party to the 2018 restrictive covenant agreement.
Okay.
I'll leave it at
that.
that.
I just think if builders can and developers can make that work, I'd like to have mine lower my tax rate to a lot so that I wouldn't have to. We just can't have private deals going on left and right from what I understand. Also, in terms of the development, I think this is a very good use of the plan, of the land. I think it's going to be a wonderful development. Everything you've developed in the past, and some people probably live in some of your developments here right now, have been great. And I appreciate you working with the citizens and the homeowners of the area. I have a fear that this anti-development is going to make us a ghost town soon, but what you've done is amazing. I appreciate it.
That concludes your remarks, Alderman?
That concludes.
Okay. Anyone else? Alderman Barzizza?
Thank you. I said some months ago that promises made should be promises kept. And I fully concur with Kevin Speed, his comments earlier in regards to what all had transpired over the years. And given the fact that the residents in the area were basically forced into an agreement because some wanted to go ahead and capitulate, some wanted to go ahead and continue the fight. But I do appreciate the fact that you two, and both parties got together and worked out a plan to where you reduce the size or increase the size of the lots, reducing the number of homes that you're going to be building to 75. I think is a good way of going about it. But given the fact that the city or the residents in the area were pressed very hard to go into something that was far away from what the original use of the property was or was zoned for to begin with the state lots, I have a hard time voting yes, but I also have a hard time voting no. And so in this particular case, I'm going to abstain, and my vote's going to abstain as a result of the, just because there's not good on both sides, and there's good on both sides, if you understand what I'm saying. You're a good builder. You're a very fine builder, John. And your projects I see all over everywhere. But yet the people of that area were made lots of promises in years past. And there was a covenant that was in place that was not, it was a covenant that was within the ownership of the property. So having said that, I will be abstaining. And I just want the property owners to know that I'm sorry that you guys had to go through all of this burden. And I'm sorry, Mr. Duke, that you had to go through all of this. And I just want to say again, it's not a good situation for good people to be in. And when you both have your interests at heart. So again, I will be voting to abstain.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other comments? Alderman Massey?
Going in the next round, Mayor.
That is correct.
Mr. Duke, if I have time at the end, I hope to get an opportunity to talk to you after I conclude my remarks. And I hope not to have to talk so fast this time. To pick up where I left off, I contend that neighborhoods already exist to create a neighborhood school. The developer has not presented any evidence that families in a neighborhood with estate lots near Germantown schools will utilize the school significantly less than families in a Germantown neighborhood with smaller lots. I do not recall the school board stating that they selected the new school site because they needed to be near neighborhoods with greater density and affordable homes. If that was their primary objective, they probably chose the wrong location. unless there was an undisclosed agreement between the school board and developers to create a neighborhood with a higher density of affordable homes around the new school. In previous meetings, the developers suggested that since every other school in the city is surrounded by neighborhoods that are zoned for smaller residential lots, the current property should be zoned for residential lots. Mr. Duke said he wants to create a neighborhood with a greater density of affordable homes to attract families with children to fill the new elementary school. However, as Mr. Duke previously noted, Germantown schools are already overcrowded, so it would be unreasonable for this board to approve the rezoning of the Reeves Shafer property for the purpose of adding more students to the school, which will create further overcrowding and possibly displace existing resident students who would otherwise be able to attend the new school. Furthermore, I contend there are parents and children alike who would like to have the option to live in a residential estate lot with more trees and green space and still be able to walk to school through neighborhoods with less traffic than neighborhoods with a higher density of homes. I personally believe the additional trees and green space afforded by residential estate zoning will be beneficial not only to residents of the neighborhood, but also the children who attend the neighborhood school. In reality, the city's alleged goal of providing a diversity of housing options is supported more by maintaining the existing residential estate zoning rather than creating more neighborhoods with smaller lots and greater density found in the many neighborhoods that already surround our existing schools. Germantown families deserve the option of living on larger lots and having a neighborhood school. Furthermore, we should consider the existing families who reside on surrounding properties who might want their children to attend the new elementary school and be able to more safely walk to school without the additional traffic that would be created by a neighborhood with greater density. Rather than being guided by existing zoning ordinances and the will of the existing residents in the neighborhood, some members of this board are substituting an arbitrary future vision of what might occur and what might be best for potential future residents who might have elementary-age children, who might reside in homes that might be built next to a school at some point in the future. The developer's entire premise for the rezoning is based on speculation and arbitrary personal opinions from individuals who stand to benefit financially from rezoning that will enable developers to increase the number of homes in neighborhoods where such density would otherwise be prohibited. The board is being asked to rezone the Reeves Shafer property for the speculative financial benefit of a developer, which is not a justifiable reason to rezone the property. The mayor and board of aldermen made the same mistake in 2007 when they voted to rezone the Cordova Triangle from residential to T4 urban to allow for more density for the financial benefit of landowners and developers. It sends a schizophrenic message to the public for city officials to vote to reduce the density on the Cordova Triangle while increasing the density of the Reeves Shafer property. Both areas are facing increased traffic from the use of government property. The government is building the Grove across the street from the Cordova Triangle and a new elementary school next to the Reeves Shafer property. The Cordova Triangle and Reeves Shafer properties are also each facing increased traffic from new apartments and new homes. I would argue that in comparison to the Cordova Triangle, the neighborhoods near Reeves Shafer are actually facing more intense changes due to the number of days and hours the school will be used in comparison to the Grove, not to mention the greater number of new homes and apartments that are planned for the Forest Hill Heights corridor. I contend the city of Germantown has already subjected this neighborhood to unfavorable rezoning changes that will greatly increase the number of residents and traffic, and it is time for the board to listen to the people who live there and simply want to maintain what is left of the character of their neighborhoods. I contend the board should vote no, or alternatively, send the applicant's revised plan along with documents that were not previously disclosed to the Planning Commission for consideration. Due to the amount of time that has passed, the information that was not disclosed, potential conflicts that were not disclosed, and changes proposed by the developer, I make the motion that we send this issue back to the Planning Commission for consideration, and I ask the city attorney to give a formal opinion about the potential conflicts of interest on the Planning Commission and BMA prior to any vote by either body. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. A motion was made.
We do need to have the motion, then I'll come back for my time, Mayor, if that's okay.
A motion's been made. I guess an amendment to the motion's already on the table. An amendment to the original motion's been made to remand this particular application back to the Planning Commission. Is there a second? The motion fails with no proper second, and you still have the floor, sir.
So, Mr. Duke, we have a mutual friend. He says wonderful things about you. I know your homes. I know you do a great job. I'm not opposed to you building new homes in Germantown. I think you know that I actually want you to build more homes here, and I'll support those projects. The problem lies, for me, in the way that the residents feel about your project. And in my opinion, you would be much better served by having this go back to the Planning Commission and have all of the documents disclosed. It wasn't necessarily your fault that the city didn't disclose those documents. I understand that. But the people will be much more willing to embrace your project if they trust the politicians to keep those promises that were made to them. But for the sake of your neighbors, I'm asking you to advise the board to send this project back to planning so that the process can start over again and so that people will trust you and they'll be able to trust the board again. Let's take all of those documents that were concealed and let's put that back in front of the Planning Commission. If there were conflicts on the Planning Commission, let's have those disclosed now. And perhaps those individuals recuse themselves from the vote. Perhaps when you come back, you'll get all 5 votes, and perhaps you'll get all the support of the people in that area, and that's what I want to see you have. I want to see everyone in the city support this.
My name is John Duke. I live at, well, my business is at 985 Reddick Cove, Memphis, Tennessee. Alderman Massey, I had a unanimous vote at the Planning Commission. I didn't need any one person's vote there. Everybody agreed this was a very good project. It was a good use. You stated my arguments very eloquently, and I agree with all of them except for the fact I never said that Germantown schools are overcrowded because I don't know whether they are or not. You know, that's not my place to say. I know that Germantown schools are fantastic and that this city is known for its neighborhood schools. And this school needs a neighborhood, and I want to build that. Also, Alderman Massey, I don't understand. I've reached an agreement with the neighbors that what has made this country great is compromise, and we have compromised. We have gone to the table, and we have heard and listened to each other, and we have arrived at a compromise that everybody is happy with except for Mr. Speed. Now, Mr. Speed was not in a, I don't understand exactly where he keeps talking about the promises. He was not a signatory on the original document.
Well, here's my thing, if you don't mind me interrupting you for just a second, is that there are a lot of those people that signed that agreement that basically felt held up. They felt like they were told that by someone that, listen, if you don't sign this agreement, things are going to get a lot worse for you, meaning that we'll build something that's going to be a lot worse than what you're going to get if you compromise. Now, I wasn't there for those conversations. I'm just telling you what was told to me. I have no reason to doubt those individuals, and they didn't say that you conveyed that message to them. But I am telling you that that's one of the reasons that they agreed. And it wasn't fair for the city to put them up and let this get beyond the second vote because that gave you leverage over those residents. And I think if we go back to the planning, it would just level the playing field and make everyone feel a lot better about this.
Alderman Massey, it has been said over and over tonight that the city of Germantown is not a party to the original agreement. They're not a party to the agreement that I have recommended, I mean that we have signed and agreed to. But ours was done in the correct fashion. It was recorded. The other document was not recorded. There's not anyone here opposing this rezoning that was a party to that document. So, Alderman Massey, I don't understand what your issue is, really. I still believe this is a good use of land. It meets all the criteria. I looked at this property many years, as many other developers did, and it was zoned RE. And I didn't come down here to try to rezone it because there was no reason to. But the school created the reason, and the widening of the road, and the cutting off of the school from the other neighborhood. That became a buffer. And we as a city need to be able to look at changing circumstances and be able to make wise choices. It is unwise to be locked into the past and saying, we're going to keep our eyes shut based on something that was decided 15 years ago, and not be able to look at what has happened yesterday that has changed the area.
But Mr. Dukes,
I will ask that the two of you conclude your remarks. You're past 10 minutes. So one last comment, Alderman, and then that concludes your second round.
Mr. Duke, when zoning ordinances are passed, part of the reason that they're passed, much like covenants in a gated community, are to protect those people who buy in on the front end around those neighborhoods. And those people bought in with the understanding that your property was going to be zoned residential estate. And the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, each time it changes, shouldn't come back and just arbitrarily decide that that zoning that was designed to protect the existing residents should be removed.
Thank you, sir. You made your point. Vice Mayor, did you want the floor?
Just for a moment, Mr. Duke, I don't have any questions for you. Thank you. Mr. Ross, I actually don't have any questions for you either. Just a comment. Our role on this board is to make hard decisions on very complex issues. There is likely not a time where something comes to us that we cannot see both sides' perspectives. There's a period on that. I'm not going to abstain. I will be voting in support of the rezoning.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other comments? I will remind the board before the vote's taken, you're voting on the rezoning of this property and not any private covenants, restrictions, or private arrangements. Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza.
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
The measure passes. We move to item number 12 on the agenda this evening. Appointment, Germantown Board of Education, Position 3. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. The board is asked this evening to appoint an individual to serve on the Germantown Board of Education, filling the vacancy in position number 3. The ordinance that was approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen a number of years ago, actually 2013, that established the school board in the first place, clearly states that if a vacancy occurs on the school board during any period of time, that the body that is responsible for making that appointment is the Germantown Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Until such time, or if an individual has time to qualify and run for office at the next general election, that it has been determined that there is not time available for an individual to file and run for office, so the board is in a position, they'd be in a position regardless to make this appointment at this point in time, even if the vacancy happened in January. But it didn't, and due to the timing of the individual who declared or who resigned from this position, it didn't allow enough time for anyone to file for office. We established a couple of weeks ago a process with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in which we would present to the board individuals who were very grateful who put their names forward in the first place. We had 19 applications initially received. Last Monday, a week ago tonight, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, through a consensus building process, narrowed that group down to 8 candidates on Wednesday and Thursday of this past week. All of those candidates were interviewed with a standard set of questions by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. As we indicated to each one of the individuals who participated in the interviews, all 8, we stated that all 8 names would come forward to the board at the September 24th meeting, which is this evening, and a name from that group of 8 would be placed into nomination and voted on and confirmed by this body. So, Mayor and Board, that's where we are this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. I will open the floor for nominations. Alderman Yonda.
I'd like to nominate Trent Fleming.
There is a nomination for Trent Fleming. Is there a second? Is there a second for Trent Fleming for school board? Seeing no one come forward, the floor is open for nominations. Alderman Owens.
Yes, Mayor, I'm sorry, I guess just to discuss, first of all, if the board will indulge me, just for a brief second, there's a group of 18 individuals who have applied. And I know most of you are probably familiar with this process and have followed it, but I would like to read the names of these boards and us all say thank you for them giving of themselves to come under intense scrutiny that this type of process suggests. And if I'll be brief, Brenda Bryant, Charles Buffington, Kyle Eaton, Trent Fleming, Morris Heath, Carol Irwin, Kim Johnson, Manjit Kaur, Jeffrey Kay, Rebecca Luter, Mary McDonald, Connie Mungle, Mike Parham, David Pickler, Ernest Rocco, Marjorie Reynolds, Barbara Stanford, Patricia Tormina, and Todd Zablotsky. I know I speak for the board, and I never do this, but I know I speak for the board when I say we appreciate you giving of your time and putting yourself out there for the betterment of our community. I've got just a couple of prepared remarks. We are blessed to live in a community in which residents with talent, education, experience, and know-how are willing to volunteer their time to make our education system the best it can be. I am humbled to play a part in making decisions of this caliber that affect our community in such a positive way. I wanted to give everyone my thoughts when selecting a candidate. I was interested in having a candidate with a variety of qualities, certainly education and ability to understand budgeting, a secure understanding of the role of the school board member, what a school board member is and what a school board member is not, that role. I was hoping to have someone with leadership experience. All these were characteristics I hope to see. I also wanted someone who would support the district. It's no secret that I'm an advocate for not only the city of Germantown, but also for the GMSD school district. I believe that the superintendent, staff, our teachers, and our school board have done a great, what they've done in a short period of time is nothing short of miraculous. The awards and accolades speak for themselves. I believe we are at a crossroads, and that's been said before, and maybe a touch cliche, but as we look to the future of our district, my children's educational future, my kids are in the school system. I know most of you know that. We need someone who is a bridge builder, someone who is a collaborator, and someone who is a consensus maker. We have to get, and this is my opinion, we have to get back to civil discourse. I believe that we've gone from being neighbors to, we need to get back to being neighbors who may disagree, who may even vigorously debate one another, but then at the end of the night, we move forward harmoniously. So I think, as I said, the list of all of our candidates was very impressive, but the person I'm nominating tonight has all the characteristics I mentioned and the ability to bring our school board together harmoniously. She also offers much more. She's a Leadership Germantown graduate, a parent with children in the district, a reverend, and a church leader. She has management experience and experience with running a school. She's a cancer survivor. She's honest and transparent and a bridge builder, and she has a children-first mentality. Mayor, at this time, I would like to put forward the nomination of Reverend Rebecca Luter for School Board Position 3.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
Mayor, point of order.
Sure.
I'm not opposed to Ms. Luter, but Alderman Owens and I were talking earlier about possibly having the discussion about our nominees before we voted, and I thought that's what we agreed upon at the meeting the other night. I'm not going to step in and try to hijack your motion. We'll come back, and I think the rest of the board members would expect your motion to be heard, but from my perspective, I would kind of like to give my case for the person that I would like to have nominated, and if anybody else wants to talk about who they think should be nominated, I think that's fair to all the candidates, and I think that's what we agreed to. Again, let's come back to Forrest or Alderman Owens
Sure.
and allow him to make the motion. Would you be opposed to that, Alderman Owens?
There was no agreement at that meeting. There were no agreements made. Our process, we've had 2 appointments in the last 4 years, one for an aldermanic position and one for a school board position. We followed the same process. So we currently have a motion on the floor with a second. Now it's time for discussion. Your point of order is overruled. Any discussion?
Sure. So, Alderman Owens, I'd hope that we would just all have the discussion before someone made a motion, and I think you and I agree that that's what we agreed on. Like I said,
Point of order.
Yes. What is your point of
When
order?
did you agree to that?
At the second round of interviews, when we had the discussions about how we were going to do this process, when I brought it up at the end of the meeting, then I suggested that we have this process outlined before we got here tonight, so there was no disagreement.
Well, at work sessions, we do not make decisions.
Yeah, of
All
course.
right, we do not make
Mayor,
decisions.
Thank you,
If
sir.
I could add,
Sure.
the process was clearly identified.
It doesn't
at the
matter. I'm
beginning.
just going to read my comments in about the person that I support, and then we'll go back to the motion. I mean, it's really not a big deal. I just thought,
Sure. You have the
out of
floor.
fairness, we might do it that way. I certainly don't want to taint the motion to nominate Ms. Luter. I think you were an excellent candidate, quite frankly. I enjoyed your interview. So, and like Alderman Owens, I want to say thank you to all the applicants who applied for the position. We really appreciate that. There were 3 candidates who stood out in my mind due in part to their overwhelming support they seem to have from the community. I received more emails, phone calls, and contact from residents supporting Charles Buffington, Marjorie Reynolds, and Dr. Patricia Tormina. Each is uniquely qualified and would be excellent representatives on the school board. Having said that, I gave a lot of weight to the opinion of my friend Suzanne Jones as we discussed which applicant had the skills and characteristics that would best reflect the will of voters who elected Ms. Jones to be their voice on the school board. In 2016, Suzanne Jones received more votes than any of us have received in any election, so I felt it was important to listen to her opinion. Ms. Jones had 3 children enrolled in GMSD, and she expressed that she felt it was very important to the voters for the BMA to select an applicant who also has children in the school district. Ms. Jones believed that Marjorie Reynolds is the person that the voters would like to see fill the vacancy and be their voice on the school board. After meeting Ms. Reynolds' husband and 3 children and interviewing Ms. Reynolds, I believe she is the right person to fill the vacancy and be the people's voice on the school board. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to take just a moment to speak to the process and to the citizens who applied for this appointment to the Board of Education. We in Germantown are blessed to live in a community that values education, public education specifically. We have capable and passionate citizens as evidenced by the 19 highly qualified applicants for this vacant position. And I want to thank each of those for making this an exceedingly difficult decision. It takes great courage and conviction to step up for public service, and I thank each one of them for their willingness to serve. Having served in an appointed position on the Shelby County School Board, I believe I have a unique perspective on this process. An appointment is a much more accelerated means to selecting the right person for this open position. We don't have months of campaigning where we can pore over platforms to see what the candidates' positions are. In this appointment, I read every word that they wrote. I relied heavily on the documents they submitted to us and reached out to clarify as needed to either the applicant directly or to those that they had served with previously. I could see that all clearly have a passion for education in our community and feel they can serve the students and family of our district well. I met with 2 parents who have children in the district who come from diverse backgrounds and who attended all 8 interviews to gain their perspective. With the understanding that there's only one, just one out of 19, and then back down from 8, only one appointment to be made, it's pretty much assured that there will be many who are willing to serve who will be disappointed. I hope that's not the case, because I believe that we are working toward that best decision. Alderman Owens pointed out many of those attributes. I would be proud to serve with each of those candidates we interviewed, and again, thank all for making the decision so difficult. We are charged with looking at the current GMSD board, mindful that it will change with the upcoming election in November, and making the decision as to who will bring their own unique skill set that best enhances and improves the board so they can continue the exceptional work of the district, hand in hand with our superintendent and the administration. As the interviews concluded late Thursday night and with thoughtful and deliberate consideration over the weekend, I have a much clearer sense of how I believe the board could be strengthened with the addition of the candidate offered in Alderman Owens' motion. Reverend Luter's greatest strengths are her ability to weigh complex issues in a manner that encourages dialogue to find the best possible solution. I've had personal experience with her decision-making skills not only as a member of the church, but also as a staff member where she was lead associate pastor. Reverend Luter possesses 3 characteristics that I look for in an extraordinary school board member. She has a clear vision for our district and will work toward enhancing the goals and vision of the district collaboratively with her fellow board members while ensuring they measure the success of the district and the superintendent against those goals. I believe Reverend Luter has a clear understanding of what the role of a school board member is and what it is not, as well as the vision of where the district should aspire to grow. She values and respects the work of the team, whether that be a fellow board member or administration. I believe this is needed and necessary for our school board, as it is for any board. Lastly, I believe she'll make decisions through the prism of what's best for all students. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Alderman Barzissa.
Thank you, Mayor. I look back at the process from 2 years ago, and there's some difference between the candidates we had 2 years ago and the candidates we have today. We had a considerable number of PhDs or PhD candidates. We had lots of educators. That's where I kind of looked more so at as far as the candidates are concerned. This particular year, so 19 people, that's incredible, and I truly appreciate all 19 stepping out, particularly 2 individuals who have got tremendous amount of experience in education. And those 2 people are Dr. Mary McDonald and Mr. David Pickler. Both of them have walked the walk, talked the talk. They've done everything there is to do in education. They are seasoned in their experience in education, both incredibly intelligent. Dr. McDonald is an incredibly well-written person. She was superintendent of the Diocese of Memphis schools for a number of years. She built a number of schools. And quite frankly, when we met and we pared it down to the 8, Dr. McDonald got 5 of 5 votes, which in my way of thinking was a pretty outstanding record on the part of the candidates. There were some with 4 for 5 and 3 for 5, and that's how we pared it down to 8. We thought we were going to get it down to 7, but it ended up that we had an extra candidate who had 3 votes out of the 5. So that's how we got to the 8. And I look at Dr. McDonald getting all 5 votes. One, and he wasn't here, but he gave his vote ahead of time, Alderman Yanda. And though she's highly seasoned and doesn't have children in the school system, what disqualifies her? What disqualifies Marjorie Reynolds, who's a whole lot younger, who's got children in the school system? Each and every one of these candidates have different attributes, different gifts they can give to our school system. This is probably the hardest decision that I have made in regards to the 2 votes 2 times that we had to vote, one for Alderman and one for 2 years ago for the school board. So we need to look carefully, and the process, I think, needs to be a little deeper than just a nominee and then whoever gets 3 votes wins. Yes, the process we used a couple of years ago, but I think we need to look at it a little deeper because there are people who are just above and beyond the norm. I think Mr. Buffington brings, with his military background and his having children in the school, he's a tremendous candidate. Ms. Tormina, again, I got more emails and calls about her than anyone else. Rebecca, you were bird dogging me pretty hard the other day, and I told you I didn't want to talk with you. I didn't want to talk with anybody, and so I could evaluate you at the time of when we were talking to each of the candidates. So I look at the process as a winner take all with 3 votes. I look at that original breakdown of how the vote went when Mary McDonald got 5 for 5, and I forget how the rest of it broke down. Patrick, you have it in your phone because you took a picture of it. I would like for you to read that.
Do you still have it?
I'm going to see.
Patrick, I have it if you don't.
It's no reflection on you, Reverend Luther. I'm just...
Mayor, if the alderman tell me what he wants, I'll be glad to read it.
I have
for
it.
Patrick.
I have it. Mr. Buffington, there were, and with all due respect, Alderman Burgess, we weren't voting, we were selecting, building a consensus on who to move forward. So
yeah.
Mr. Buffington was for, Mr. Eaton, no, excuse me.
Just read the
Mr.
ones that got the
Fleming,
votes, I think.
Dean, I'm trying. Ms. Fleming was 3. Rebecca Luter was 4. Dr. McDonald was 5. Let's see. Ms. Mungle was 3. Mr. Pickler was 3. Let's see. Marjorie Reynolds was 3. And Dr. Tormina was 4. I believe that's the count. Yes.
Need I say more? I mean, we pretty much, in a way, voted that night, and I know this is not the process that we used 2 years ago, but it was the way we voted that night. And so
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but point of order.
Yes,
that was a
point of order.
selection process, and that was prior to the interviews, Alderman Brazos. And I respect what you're saying, and I see what you're saying, but there was a lot more that went into this process than just checking a box.
I understand, but we did have the information beforehand that we could make the valuation on each of these candidates. So having said that, I think we should just go ahead and move on. This is just for the good of the...
Alderman Deonda, did you have anything you'd like to add? No. Okay. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. And Alderman Owens, I appreciate your clarification. The meeting on, I believe it was Tuesday. Maybe it was Monday. Monday the 1st. On that Monday night, that meeting was to come together as a body to move forward candidates to be interviewed, to move from 19 to hopefully 6, 7, what ultimately ended up to 8 interviews for candidates where we needed to learn more about what their vision for the district was. The questions that I asked were specific to what their view of the voucher in the voucher's role in public education. The other question that I asked was regarding the 5-year strategic plan that the district had in place, whether they could work to support the body if they championed an issue that was in the majority. Those were important questions for me. And to be clear, so the citizens that are watching or that are here, it was not a vote. It was simply to move forward those candidates that we could then interview. Thank you.
Mayor, I have.
Any other discussion?
Sure.
Yes, Alderman Massey?
Sure. I'd just like to direct my comments to Ms. Luter personally. You know, I actually voted to put you through to the interview process. I was one of the 4 votes that you got, along with Alderman Barzizza. So I am certainly not against you serving on the school board. You're going to get my vote tonight, and I'm confident you're going to get the vote of all the other aldermen tonight. When I raised my point earlier, it was simply that I wanted to have an opportunity to make the case for the candidates that were in my top 3. You were my 4th. I mean, you're that close. You were also the 4th candidate on the list of people who contacted me. So Marjorie Reynolds, Charles Buffington, and Patty Tormina, more people contacted me to support them than did you, but you got a significant amount of support and people calling and writing in support of you serving on the school board. And I'm very supportive of you. I think you will do a wonderful job. To Alderman Barzizza's point about the board that passed got everybody through to the interviews, you were one of 3 people who got 4 votes. There's only one other person that got more votes than you. So there was somewhat of a consensus during the interview process. So I don't want our arguments about process to taint you serving on the school board, because our arguments over the process is not a reflection upon whether or not you are qualified. You are qualified. We are all going to support you. The community is going to support you, and you are going to make an excellent school board member. And I thank you for applying, and I wish you the best.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Well, we have a new school board member. Congratulations, Reverend Luter. My understanding, you'll be sworn in tomorrow, and then you will start to get a lot of emails. So we have reached conclusion of our meeting this evening. We are adjourned.